John D. Rockefeller, better known as the richest man in modern history, made his millions through the oil industry. But we all know that. What we want to tell you is how he spent his many millions, especially in a time when you couldn't throw it all on crypto. Stick around till the end of this video and we'll tell you. How much is Rockefeller actually worth? Rockefeller made his many millions by being one of the first people to enter the oil refining business in the United States. He then went on to found the Standard Oil Company, when it then went on to become the largest oil refinery company in America. In fact, it was so big that the Supreme Court ordered it to be dissolved and broke it up into other smaller companies, like Exxon Mobil. During the time he was alive, Rockefeller amassed up to $1.4 billion. Much of this wealth came from the oil company itself and the incredible amounts of investments that he'd made in property and gold. In today's world, having just over $1 billion isn't that impressive when you have Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates as comparisons. But we have to account for inflation as well. You know, that nasty thing that's caused the price of gas to go way up in the past 5 years? Well, in inflation-adjusted terms, Rockefeller's quaint $1.4 billion amounts up to just north of $400 billion. Now, that is impressive. To put things into perspective, the founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, only has $125 billion. That's right, the richest man that we know today isn't really the richest man this world has ever known. For reference, you could buy a couple of NFL teams, the Mona Lisa, even a whole country if you paid off all its debt. The possibilities are endless when you have enough money to fill the oceans with, or buy a fleet of yachts to fill the oceans with. How did Rockefeller spend his money? Of the many millions that Rockefeller had, it'd be interesting to see where America's first business tycoon spent most of his money. He paid people to substitute for him in the Civil War. Let's start with some of the more interesting and outlandish purchases, which has to be paying people to take his place in the Civil War. Despite his support for abolitionism, the movement that works toward the end of trade slavery in Europe and America, he elected not to participate in the Civil War. When the war broke out in 1861, his youngest brother was injured in battle, and John was the family's breadwinner, so he was granted an exemption. His commodities business was booming at the time, and a lot of people's livelihoods depended on him, so he hired replacement soldiers to fight the war in his place. This was a frequent practice during the war, and having so much money allowed him to easily pay these substitute men to fight for the cause. Talk about being a rebel, but with a cause. He paid Winston Churchill to write his biography. Almost. Having the thought to consider hiring a British Prime Minister to write your biography sounds pretty ridiculous to me. The British Prime Minister, who's more commonly known for leading Britain during the Second World War, was also a very gifted writer. Don't believe us? You don't have to. In 1953, he was even awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. The Rockefeller family, who had known about his not-so-secret talent, had then asked Churchill in the 1930s to write John's biography, and he even considered it. The former prime minister quoted asking for a payment of $250,000. The family then went with another author, albeit a cheaper option. But we still think the business tycoon would have paid for it if he really wanted to. He owned a couple of universities and colleges. Rockefeller's also made significant contributions to educational institutions, notably the Rockefeller University, which is named after him as well, and the Atlanta Baptist Female Seminary, an African-American school for women. In honor of his wife, Laura Spelman, and her parents, the African-American Women's School was renamed as the Spelman Seminary 2 years later. The college is now known as Spelman College, after going through another name change in 1924. As a result of these purchases, both Rockefeller and his wife have separate educational institutes under their names. Moreover, he was also practically the founder of the University of Chicago. He made major investments in his hair. In his 40s, Rockefeller had developed alopecia, which caused him to lose all of the hair on his head and body, including his mustache. However, in the early 1900s, he began to wear wigs of various lengths to give the impression that his hair grew normally. That requires a lot of investment and dedication. Imagine buying wigs with a few inches of difference and then remembering which one you have to put on. It's no wonder he was so successful if the man was so dedicated to keeping appearances. Well, imagine how dedicated he would be to his company and its expansion. He bought and built the Rockefeller mansions. The John D. Rockefeller estate, which was once known as Kykuit, is a 40-room historic house museum in Pocantico Hills. It's around 25 miles north of New York City. The now famous mansion is a work of art with an impressive art collection and a set of gardens that can make anyone jealous. After his brother, William Rockefeller, moved into Rockwood Hall, a 204-room estate nearby, John Rockefeller bought land in the surrounding region in 1893. When John and his son decided to make Pocantico Hills their home, he swiftly purchased several homes and properties in the area. He then utilized the properties for himself, his family, and his staff, or rented them out. In 1893, Rockefeller and his wife Laura moved into the Parsons Wentworth House, one of the many mansions that he owned. Until the manor was built, the company would spend winter weekends and parts of each summer and fall there, sharing the upstairs room with their adult children and in-laws. When the mansion burned down due to faulty wiring, the Rockefellers moved into a temporary mansion by the name of Kent House. Rebuilding Kykuit took almost $40,000, which I'm sure did not affect Mr. Rockefeller's net worth. The house now serves as a museum with full house tours that take place regularly. Visitors of the house get to see the impressive art collection and the gardens. However, the inner parts of the house are restricted. Some areas surrounding the house have been preserved by the National Trust for Historic Preservation back since 1991. Rockefeller's cars. Thomas Autos were thought to be among the best available cars in 1902. Even Rockefeller purchased one for his estates in Maine. Rockefeller built the Eyrie, a 100-room vacation residence on a large piece of land on Maine's Mount Desert Island, and stored a collection of personal vehicles there. One of these was the 1902 Thomas, which he used entirely on the estate's roads that he created. He only drove the automobile for a season before storing it in the estate's coach house. As a result, the car has only 500 kilometers on it and is still completely in its original condition. Imagine that, buying one of the best cars the world had to offer, and then using it to just go about your house. That's if you buy a Ferrari in today's world and then use it to just go up and down the neighborhood. That should probably give you an idea of how rich Rockefeller was. Other cars that Rockefeller possessed included a 1946 Chrysler Town Car limousine. This was the one Rockefeller mostly used, and even took this car to drop his children at school. That must have made all the kids on the playground jealous. Well, that's all for this video, folks. Tell us what you think of some of Rockefeller's purchases and his lifestyle. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you can stay updated on what some of the most important people in history spent their money on. See you next time.